Welcome to this sharpening demo, and we're going to learn a few ways to sharpen your images. So first thing, you always make sure your images are sharp in camera. You cannot make a blurry image sharp, so that is issue number one. It always has to be sharp in camera. You can't take something that's out of focus and make it into focus. There's no enhance when it comes to digital photography, so keep that in mind. But you always need to add a little oomph to it to kind of pull up that sharpening. So we're going to look at a few different ways, and then you'll do a few different ones for the to turn in for the assignment. So you can use any images you have on your hard drive, ones that you've shot, maybe even ones you shot for your portrait assignment to get them done and sharpened. So we'll look at a few ways. So the first thing we're going to look at is the sharpen tool. So the sharpen tool, if you look on your tool panel, is this triangle, and it's literally a tool where you can sharpen. So before I can do that, I'm going to take my image and convert to Smart Object so that I'm working non-destructively. And it'll take a moment, and this will increase your PSD size, so keep that in mind. So then we're going to create a new layer to continue working non-destructively, and within your control panel you want it to say sample all layers and have that checked. And you want to look at parts you want to sharpen. So I'm going to zoom in, and you can see my focal plane is really set on this part, and I want this to sharpen. So you would just kind of take your mouse like the brush tool and just kind of go over once your computer is happy. And if you notice, it kind of adds some sharpening effects, but then it also adds some really weirdness to it, so you can even take it over areas that weren't sharp, and it kind of gives this kind of ugly, gross grain. And this is what I wouldn't consider good. It kind of makes it look pixely. It pulls up these midtones and push them into highlights. It gets the noise, the digital noise, that is not great. So this is, and you can actually see that it kind of copies everything, which is kind of a cool effect in and of itself. But this is actually not a way you want to sharpen using the sharpen tool. So next we'll look at sharpen image edges. And I'm looking at different images, which you should as well. The benefit of this is you can apply more sharpening to the image that you wouldn't be able to do without the masking effect, and areas of flat color like sky, skin tones won't be sharpened. So what we're going to do is we have this image here, and I actually shoot very low depth of field, which will have the background will be blurry, so I have a very small focal plane. So what we're going to do, if you had done a bunch of edits with the adjustment layers, you would just flatten them. I'll make just a little bit of an S-curve. And then the lighting was very odd in this room, so I'm actually then blue. A little bit, I'm not actually sold on that. But I would have all my adjustments, shift click the top two, do a Command J to copy and Command E. And that's how you would kind of make a copy. So I would just rename this to sharpening. I'm just going to do another Command J of that as well. So in your top one, we're going to desaturate, which we're going to remove all the colors. We're going to go to Image, Image Adjustments, Desaturate. It removes all the color tones, which would make it into a black and white image. And then we're going to go to Filter, Stylize, and Find Edges. I'm actually going to go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. This is to help us work non-destructively. And it takes a few moments. Alright, so you see we have our smart filter icon here. And that just means that it is going to help us work non-destructively. So then we're going to go to Filter, Stylize, Find Edges. And it sort of isolates the edges here. And then we're going to go to Image, Image Adjustment to Invert. Oh, that's not what I wanted. But it's going to be a Command I or a Control I just to invert. You see I was using a higher ISO, which is why I have so much grain. Then we're going to go to Image Adjustments Levels. That's going to be a Command L. And this is that histogram. You see we have a lot of elements here because we inverted the image and it is desaturated. So what we're going to do is the white is areas that are going to be sharpened. So if I take it all the way here, these are my midtones. You see, only the white parts will be sharpened. We can adjust here as well and play around with the areas that I'm going to be sharpened. Only the white will be sharpened and the black will be non-sharpened. We're going to hit OK. And what we're going to do is go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. We're going to add a 1 or 2 pixel blur to even sharpen, to soften everything. And just very slightly. Just going to think about that for a second. About 1.2, hit OK. And what I'm going to do actually here is actually rasterize everything. So I'm going to right click and rasterize layer. Once we're happy with all of our adjustments, and if you're unhappy, you can go to that smart layer that we had below and make adjustments. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the layer beneath it, this sharpening here, and we're going to add layer mask. And we're going to click on this thumbnail. You can see we can add everything. So while this is selected, we can go to Image, Apply Image, and we're going to actually go to that sharpening layer and we're going to make sure this is RGB, multiply opacity, and it's going to take that edits and place them over here. We're going to hide this layer. It's just going to be real subtle. So if you take this layer, the edits are super subtle, but it's how we looked at applying the edges and masking it. And just so you can kind of see the adjustments. And you can even also do more filters, sort of smart sharpen and whatnot. And that's with finding the edges. I really typically don't like this. I feel like that is almost too subtle. It's too many steps to get to what you want. So next we'll look at an unsharp mask. So we have this image here. And what we're going to do, actually we're going to do it to this pupper. So I'm going to work on this pupper, and we're going to convert to Smart Object, or convert for Smart Filters. They've adjusted these. So we can make our layers readjustable. And again, it's going to take a little longer because it is a very large file for me. Alright, and then we're going to work non-destructively and go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Alright, so once this pulls up, you can kind of see we have our preview dialog box. And we've got these nice sharp edges here, which are really going to be pulled out. And I may even zoom out a little. So what we have is we have different sliders here. So the mount slider controls the strength of the sharpening. The higher the number, the more sharpening is applied. The radius controls how many pixels on the edges are sharpened. The higher number here will have a more extreme look, and a lower number will have a less extreme. And threshold determines the pixels that are impacted. So if you set it 0, all pixels will be impacted. If you set it higher, less pixels will be impacted. So this is kind of going to be getting used to. So if it's a higher threshold, less pixels. If it's 0, all the pixels. And this is kind of thinking about that threshold, those levels, that histogram over here. If the radius is a higher number, remember it's a lot of pixels are affected. And the amount, you can see if I take this all the way up, it's going to have this weird cartoony sharpened look that may be nice, but that's not what we're entirely going for. We want it to look as natural as possible. So I may play around with the lower radius, and maybe a higher mount, and maybe even take my threshold a little lower, but definitely look at the adjustments that you have. So while this is applied, you can see it's added some help. They don't want it to look overly sharpened. So the next one to look at is Smart Sharpen. We're actually I'm going to go back to this first one and delete this layer that I did not like. So I already have this as an adjustment, a smart filter. So I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen, and it's got a couple of neat features. So we can save and reshoot presets. It's going to help us reduce the amount of time sharpening on the images. Or we could save the preset and apply it to a whole bunch of different images we shot maybe in the same lighting. So this, we have the amount. Like before, we kind of played with those sliders before. And then we're also looking at the radius, reduce noise, and remove a couple different things. We have Gaussian blur, motion blur, and lens blur. Now it can't make up for things that do not exist. But I may even zoom out. You can even like uncheck your preview. And that's maybe what was original compared to this. And you can be, play around with your adjustments, and it does a lot more for the sharpening, and you can even toggle down specifically for the shadows and highlights. So we have different levels of sharpening to impact everything, and I want you to kind of play around, and while you're working with the Smart Filter, Smart Sharpen, you really have so many more options. I'm just playing around, trying to get the adjustments just right. And I'm going to hit OK. It's going to load for a few seconds, but then we'll have a Smart Sharpen. This one I like. I feel like I have a lot of control over it. And when you're doing the Filter Smart Sharpen non-destructive, it does take a lot more time, and it does make your file size a lot larger, but I highly recommend it. If you see over here, my document is 120.3 megabytes as a PSD, so it's already a very large file. And it's just taking a few more moments. Alright, now it's done, and as you can see, we can really play around, and we have just the littlest amount of sharpening. But it makes that nose stand out so much more. And if you don't like stuff, you can always double click in your adjustments within your layer to make adjustments. That's why I really like playing around with the Smart Filter. Anything that you would make adjustments for, they'd be permanent, and then if you did something you didn't like, it would be a little bit of a hassle to go back. I'm just going to hit cancel for the moment, and we're going to go for my last one, which is High Pass Filter, which is my favorite. So what we're going to do is we're going to make Command J to copy, and we're going to make this image, and we're going to desaturate it. And this is sort of finding edges. Image adjustments, desaturate. And then so we're removing the colors, and we're going to convert for Smart Filter. I'm going to filter, convert for Smart Filters. And it'll take a few moments. And once it's desaturated and converted for Smart Filters, see that little icon in your layer, that means it's a smart object. You can go to Filter, Other, High Pass, and this is going to be an edge detector. So what this does is, it kind of makes it look like a solarized image, but it finds those edges, and you can play around with the radius So it controls the areas, so if you increase the radius more, the photo will show up in the gray and not, I like to keep it pretty minimal because if I do something like this, then all of that will appear sharpened. I really just want it to be the edges. And then I will hit OK when I'm happy with it. And since you're working with the smart filters, it's going to be so helpful. I'm going to take my blending mode from normal, and you can do overlay, soft light, hard light, or linear light. So if we go to overlay, soft light, hard light, or vivid light. Remember, this is how light is passed through the layer. And what I like overlay the best. And what I like to do is I feel like it's almost way too much to sharpen. If I zoomed out, it's almost too much. That noise maybe I don't want. I will typically do a layer mask, double click my layer mask, which is right here, invert, and use my brush tool, B for brush. White will reveal, and black will conceal. Anywhere where I paint white in this thumbnail will add sharpening, and that way I'm really selective about my sharpening, keeping my focus maybe on the eyes or other details or just the edges, so that not everything, skin tones maybe don't need as much sharpening. But thinking about, I'm really selectively adjusting where my sharpening goes. So I can kind of do this all day. This is the one that I use the most. And again, it's real subtle. But I like the subtlety of it, to really have total control. You know, maybe I'll sharpen parts of the hair to really pull that out. For your demo, the turn-in, you'll be due in a week, and you'll submit 3 of the images you shot this semester. They be anything, images you've submitted before, images that are new, images with people really are great for this, so you can practice. You'll need to do one using high pass sharpening. You need to do one using unsharp mask, and the last one using smart sharpen. You'll need to submit your PSDs so I can see your layers and your JPEGs. You'll have specific file names for it, which are located in the PDF, and you'll submit them online to Canvas. So I hope you have fun sharpening and try out a bunch of different effects.